Yeah, my name's Jonathan Maxwell. This is my wife, Angela. We've been living in Easley for about the past 5 years, and we just enjoy the upstate. We used to live in Greenville, South Carolina, and moved here and enjoy the property, enjoy the area.
So when we first moved into the house in 2021, we were told by the realtor we'd probably have about maybe 4 to 5 years before we'd have to get a new roof on the house. And we knew it was probably going to be costly just because of the length of the house. So I started praying that the Lord would provide a roof. And at our last house, we actually had a hailstorm and we were able to get a roof for free. John actually had prayed that we'd be able to get a new roof without having to pay a dime. And the Lord answered that with a yes. So it was a huge answer to prayer. So I was like, the Lord did it then. He can provide again. So I actually started praying for a hailstorm, which is probably not typical. And we had gotten 2 quotes from 2 different roofers. One was $28,000, one was $24,000. So just the amount of the cost for John, John's a landscaper, so, that work is so hard on his body. So I knew how much it would take for him to have to save up the money, us as a family, to save up the money for that new roof. It would just be backbreaking work. So I started praying that the Lord would provide a new roof for us and send a hailstorm. And May 8th, 2024, we had a hailstorm, and I was just so excited. And we had, the insurance company come out right away. We had tons of roofers come by. They blitzed this whole area here. And we watched, one by one, this neighbor get a new roof, this neighbor get a new roof, this neighbor get a new roof. And our insurance company came back and they denied us. They said there wasn't damage on our roof. It was pretty discouraging because all of the roofers we had all said, yes, you have extensive roof damage. There's stippling in your pavement out here. When we see this out here, we know that there's damage on the roof. Just the size of the hail that we had too. So I even sent the pictures of the roof to the former roofer who had come by to give us a quote that January before the storm. And he said, yes, that's new damage. You need to get with your insurance company. I said, well, we did, and they denied us. So we were pretty frustrated. We actually hired another adjuster. He came out and said, yes, there's damage. He tried to kind of help us on our behalf. That didn't go anywhere. We hired another adjuster, a company. They couldn't get anywhere with that insurance claim. We even went to the state to say, our insurance company is denying this claim. Here's what everybody has been saying, different roofers, all of this proof that there was damage. And the insurance company still came back and said they took a swatch from the least damaged area of the roof, and that's what they sent in and said, no, there's no damage. They said that our roof was covered with trees. And if you can see our house, there's no, none of it's covered with trees. So it was just very frustrating.
And we could tell that they were being dishonest about a handful of things, and we knew that. It was frustrating to see how, close we got to getting a new roof. All the neighbors received one, and, their insurance companies was pushing that through. And we're disappointed because we've been with State Farm for almost 20 years. We had our camper insured with them, our vehicles, life insurance, short-term disability. So we almost felt like we're just getting the short end of the stick, and we kind of almost just lost hope because, like she said, we hired a private insurance company, and they came, and we won't mention any names, but they looked over everything, got with State Farm, and then State Farm just told them, hey, we can't help you out. There's no chance of, them getting a roof. Just end of story. So, but we kind of fought this for almost 2 years. I contacted an attorney. I thought about going the legal route, going through, small claims, doing that. But of course, that'd have been expensive too. So Luckily, one of my landscape customers, she reached out to me, and she said that Frank, had helped her out. They had a bunch of trees that fell during the storm, and Frank came and he helped them get a new roof, siding, all that type of stuff. So she's the one that kind of led me to Frank and the Winkley Group, and the rest is history. He did an amazing job coming in here and helping us out.
John came to me and he told me about his customer mentioning the Winkley Group, and he's like, I think I'm going to call him. And I was like, go for it. At this point, we're almost 2 years in, and I've given up at this point, just thinking, no, we're going to have to pay for this out of pocket. It is what it is. The Lord provided a job for me. That's maybe the route that he's going to, just use for paying for this roof. It's going to come off of our hard work, and that's fine. That happens, but it was still a little discouraging, but he said he was going to call Frank, and I said, that's fine, go for it. He's not going to get anywhere.
And I remember, my first conversation with Frank, I never forget it. He called me. I pulled over my landscaping trailer and talked to him, and I was like, okay, we'll have a short conversation, maybe a couple of minutes, but I could tell that Frank was, had a vested interest in, our situation, our story, which was something refreshing, because, that's something that most people, they don't care. They just want your money, just get in, get out. But he actually, took time to want to know our situation and asked a lot of questions. And, we've talked to him numerous occasions, and just very extremely personable. And we really appreciate that, because you don't get that a lot of times. You get people that just want to, just come in and, real quick, in and out. But he, you can tell he really appreciates his customers, and it's his passion.
John came to me and he's like, Frank, it didn't work out. It was a no. And I was like, well, of course. That's what I expected. I had no hope, zero hope. Hope in the Lord, of course, but not hope.
A little bit pessimistic.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. So when he came back and John called me, I was at work, and he goes, you're not gonna believe this. He's like, when the adjuster came out and Frank met, he's like, they're gonna pay for it. The insurance company's gonna pay. And I was like, no words. Just unbelievable, just amazing. And then Frank and I hadn't talked at that point, and he called me after John called me, and Frank and I talked on the phone for probably 30 minutes to an hour. I clocked out of work and then just went out in our little area outside, and Frank and I talked, and it was so refreshing to talk to Frank. He just is so passionate about what he does. He's so knowledgeable. He's an expert at talking with these companies, knowing what needs to be paid out, what the cost is, and putting all that together.
And one more thing I'd like to add, we were expecting a 25-year architectural shingle, and Frank came back. He's like, nope, we're getting you 50 years. So that right there just shows me, he just goes above and beyond, your wildest expectations, And we got a skylight put in the back where we had a metal roof. They did a rolled roof, and we got that installed with the skylight.
It was really important to me. At my job, we don't have windows, so I like to have some natural light at my house when I'm home. So just talking to Frank about that, he knew that was important to me. So we were able to get that worked out, to get most of that covered. We won't have to get a new roof probably within our lifetime. So it's just an immense relief, to have all of that work done.
Never too late to, try the Winkley Group. That's something that we learned, because, like I said, we kind of lost all hope with insurance and with, corporate America and all that type of stuff. And I feel like full confidence in the Winkley Group, helping somebody out that's been rejected, even with different companies, insurance companies or different adjusters. I think they can more than capable of helping them out from point A to point B. And the process was seamless, because they handle the contractors, they do the vetting, all that stuff is extremely valuable. So it's something that I have full confidence in referring them.
It's just so nice to have somebody fighting in your corner for you. We'd fought so much. And then Frank came in, and he just stepped in and he took over, and he he fought and he won. So we think so highly of him. We want to promote him, suggest it to anybody who's struggling or feeling defeated. Like, Frank can help.